Hello everyone and welcome to ReceipterPro Basic Training. In this video we are going to cover the basic functionality of ReceipterPro, how to import your gifts, how to preview your receipts or acknowledgement letters, and then how to make some brief edits to those documents, and then finally how to print and email those documents to your donor. So let's get started. The first step in ReceipterPro is to import the gifts that you want to process. So there are three ways that you can import your gifts. You can import via a or multiple batches. You can import a CSV file. So this might be the CSV export from Razor's Edge. And you can also import gifts individually by themselves if you know the record ID of the gift record. In today's example, we are simply going to import a gift or a batch into ReceipterPro. So to begin, I'm going to come up to the top left-hand corner of the ReceipterPro window, and I'm going to click the Import Batch button. This Import Batch screen will appear. This gives you the option to search for your batches in two ways. You can search for them by age, or you can also search for them by date range. So I know that the particular batches I'm interested in fall within a particular date range. I can specify that date range here. And once I've specified the date range, I can click the search button, and ReceipterPro will now begin searching your Blackbaud Razor's Edge for batches which fall within that date range. Okay, so I can see here that we've got multiple batches that fall within that range. You can just simply select the batch that you want to import, and then you can click the Import button below the list. You can also import multiple batches. So say, for example, I wanted to import these two batches. I can hold down the Control key on the keyboard and select as many batches as I want. For this particular example, I'm going to just bring in these two batches that I have selected. So I'm going to click the Import Selected Batches button. ReceipterPro will tally up the number of gifts. I will say yes, import. And then ReceipterPro will import both of those batches into ReceipterPro. So while it's importing data, it's pulling not only the gift information, but it's also pulling any constituent information. ReceipterPro can also identify some corporate contacts. So if you have relationships set up on your organization records and you want ReceipterPro to address specific individuals at organizations, you can do that also. If you have those options enabled, ReceipterPro will generate those queries and pull in all of that organizational and relationship data as well. Okay. Now that ReceipterPro has imported the gifts, we can see on the left side of the screen we have the gift list. So this is a list of all of the gifts that were in those batches. And then you can see on the right side of the screen we have a preview of the document. ReceipterPro works a lot like Microsoft Outlook. So if you're familiar with how Outlook works, where you click on the message on the left and then you see the full message on the right, that's kind of how ReceipterPro works. So we can see that the first gift that we have selected here from this donor, Bradley Bowden, with them selected, we can see their gift receipt on the right. So we can scroll down and we can see the full document. We'll talk a little bit more about how this preview window works in a moment, but I want to explain some of the columns that exist in this gift list. The first column you'll see has a plus symbol that you can click on. That just means that there is additional information about this gift, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. The next column you'll see has an exclamation mark. Now you'll notice that some of the gifts in this list have an exclamation mark and others do not. This exclamation mark is just an indicator to you that there is something special about this gift that you might want to look at. By default, ReceipterPro will automatically show an exclamation mark for any gift that is from a board member. But you can create additional business rules in ReceipterPro for other instances as well. So for example, maybe you want to automatically show the exclamation mark for gifts over $1,000. Or maybe you've got specific solicit codes that you would like ReceipterPro to show the exclamation mark for. ReceipterPro will not process the document any differently. The exclamation mark is just meant as a visual indicator to you that there's something special about this gift that you may want to pay attention to. The next column here denotes the delivery method for the document. So ReceipterPro can print documents or email them, and this is based on donor preference. So in this column, ReceipterPro will show you the delivery method that it has chosen for this particular gift or this particular receipt. If you see a little printer icon in this column, that just means that the document will be printed. If we look at the one underneath it, you'll see we've got a little envelope icon. An envelope icon just means that the document will be sent via email. ReceipterPro uses business rules to determine when it can and cannot email, and we will definitely be talking about business rules in the advanced training session. Just know for now that ReceipterPro will automatically choose the delivery method based on your business rules, and this column will indicate what was chosen. This next column you'll see has a series of little circles. If you see a gray circle, or what we call a gray dot, that just means that this gift is ready to be processed. So it can be receipted or acknowledged depending on your process. If you see a red dot here, a red dot means that this gift cannot be processed. This could be because the gift is marked as do not receipt in Razor's Edge. It could also be that maybe the gift record is marked do not acknowledge. In addition to that, you can also create additional business rules for gifts that should never be processed through ReceipterPro. And again, that's done through a business rule. So if you see a gift with a red dot here, just remember that that means ReceipterPro will just simply skip that gift. It's not going to process it. You may also come across a yellow dot as well. Yellow dots indicate that the gift has already been receipted or acknowledged in Razor's Edge. ReceipterPro will skip over this document as well. However, you can tell ReceipterPro that you want to send the document anyway. We'll talk more about this later, but this is part of what we call the reissue feature in ReceipterPro. If we wanted to issue this document anyway, we could simply override and tell ReceipterPro to reissue it. The next column will show you the record ID of the gift as it is in Razor's Edge. The next column will be the constituent name. Now this could also be the name of a corporation if it's a corporate record, and we do have some corporate records in this list today. The next column is the fund ID and the fund description, followed by the batch number, and then last we have the amount. So as I mentioned earlier, when you select the gift from the left, the preview window on the right will refresh to give you a preview of the document that's going to be sent to the donor. In this preview window, there is a lot of functionality, and there are some buttons up here at the top that we'll talk about also. But notice at the very top here, ReceipterPro will give you the gift date. It will also give you the donor's name. Again, we have the fund information. Underneath that, we have the template that ReceipterPro chose. You can have multiple receipt and letter templates in ReceipterPro, and using business rules, ReceipterPro can decide which template to choose. So because ReceipterPro will automatically choose your templates based on business rules, ReceipterPro will always tell you for each gift the template name that it chose. And then lastly, we have a little counter here that tells us the number of attachments for the document. ReceipterPro allows you to attach PDF files to your receipt documents. So say, for example, maybe you have a day of giving event coming up that you wanted to let everyone know about. You can tell ReceipterPro to include certain PDF files as attachments to every receipt or letter that it generates. If ReceipterPro is printing the letter, it would simply just print the attachment following the letter. If ReceipterPro is emailing the letter, ReceipterPro would simply attach the PDF document to the email message. If ReceipterPro chose an email delivery method, you will also have, just to the right of that information, a list of email addresses that ReceipterPro will use for sending this document. The reason that we have a list here is because based on your settings in ReceipterPro, you could have ReceipterPro send this document to multiple email addresses. So ReceipterPro will always give you the list that it's going to use here. It's important to note that this is not a list of email addresses that are on the constituent's record. This is simply the email address that ReceipterPro chose to send the document to. To the right of the email list, we have a little circle, a blue circle with the donor's initials. Underneath that, you will see the donor's constituent ID in Razor's Edge. So as I mentioned before, as you click on each one of these GIFs, ReceipterPro will generate the document and display it to you here. You have some functionality when you're working with your previews. So say, for example, we're currently looking at this gift from Hillary Dooley. So if we were looking at this document and we saw that there was something with this document that was incorrect, or maybe there was something that we wanted to change, ReceipterPro has a built-in edit mode that allows you to make changes to these documents. So if I wanted to make a change to this letter, I would simply come up just above the email addresses and I would click this edit mode button. If I click that, you'll notice that the edit mode button starts to flash. That just means that we are in edit mode and we can now make changes. Then I can click anywhere in this document and I can make my change. So just with most word processors, you can change the fonts here, you can change font sizes, etc. You can insert additional images at this point if you wanted to as well. When you're done making your changes, just simply click the edit mode button again, and that exits edit mode. This edit mode feature is typically used for those very special one-off GIFs that don't happen very often, that you need to insert maybe a special paragraph into. If you constantly find yourself going into edit mode and making changes to documents, more often than not, whatever you're doing can be automated in ReceipterPro. So I would just encourage you to contact us with some information about the changes that you're having to make, the conditions that you're having to make that change, and we can most likely automate that change for you. So again, edit mode is just used for that special one-off GIF that happens every once in a while that you need to make a change to. Next to the edit mode button is a refresh button. The refresh button simply goes back to Razor's Edge and refreshes all of the gift and constituent information and then rebuilds the document. So say, for example, maybe you were looking at this document and you see that the salutation is incorrect, or maybe there's a problem with the addressee. You could fix that information on the gift record in Razor's Edge and then come back to ReceipterPro and click refresh. ReceipterPro will pull all of that data from Razor's Edge a second time, determine what changed, and then update the document accordingly. Okay. Next to the refresh button is a delivery button. This delivery button will tell you the current delivery method. So just as the icon over in the list tells you that it's an email, you will also see email here. If you wanted to, you could temporarily override this delivery. So for whatever reason, if instead of sending this document as an email, if you wanted to print it, you could override it just by selecting print from this drop-down method. It's important to note here that you are overriding this one specific instance of this document. If you were to import another gift from the donor, it would apply the business rules again, and most likely that document would be emailed. So when you use the override feature, it's simply just for this document that you're looking at right now. Next to edit mode, you'll see a little button here called View Info. If I click this, this just gives you some information about the gift, about how ReceipterPro is seeing the gift, and it will also list out for you any business rules that have applied. So for example, we can see here that a business rule has applied, and this business rule set the delivery type to email. So if you're trying to figure out why someone is being emailed or why they're not being emailed, you can come into the View Info screen and get a lot of information about how your business rules are being processed. And we cover this in more detail in the advanced session. While you're previewing these GIFs, as I noted before, the red dots will automatically be ignored by ReceipterPro. But if, for example, maybe there's a gift in this list that you don't want to process right now, you can simply tell ReceipterPro to get rid of one of these GIFs. So if you, let's say, for example, this one for Hillary, we don't want to process it right now. Maybe we'll do it later. You can just right-click on the gift and select Remove from List. I'll click yes here, and all that does is it just removes the gift from the list in ReceipterPro. This has not touched the gift record in Razor's Edge. It still exists in Razor's Edge. Nothing has changed there. We've simply removed it from the list that we're going to process in ReceipterPro. This gift, as I mentioned before, it has a yellow dot on it, and a yellow dot just means that this gift has already been receipted, or it's either marked receipted in Razor's Edge or it's marked acknowledged in Razor's Edge. You can easily tell ReceipterPro that you want to send this document again simply by clicking this reissue button. When you do that, ReceipterPro will then allow you to process that document. You could also open up the gift record in Razor's Edge and just change its receipted or acknowledged status, but it's far easier just to bring the gift into ReceipterPro and just click the reissue button. That way you don't have to update the gift record ahead of time. This gift record that I've currently selected, you'll notice that the gift receipt that we're seeing here looks quite differently from, say, the first one in the list. The reason for that is a business rule. So ReceipterPro has determined through my business rule that this gift should receive a different template. When you are creating your templates in ReceipterPro, you can also create your business rules. So for example, you could tell ReceipterPro if the fund is Maple View, then use an entirely different template, which is what we've done here. And again, this is all done through business rules. If you wanted to see what business rule was responsible, you could again come up to View Info. And View Info will tell us right here that the business rule applied. The business rule was called full page receipt. And as a result, we set the full page receipt template. Now remember also underneath the donor's name at the top, it will always tell you the template that it chose. So in this case, the template is full page receipt. And we know that because of the business rule. If you ever have any questions about why ReceipterPro is choosing one template or another, always check your business rule list on the View Info screen. That will tell you exactly which business rules are responsible for setting the templates. Let's take a look at this gift here from Geva Import Company. We can see that it's got a red dot next to it. Now, it has a red dot next to it because this gift is marked as Do Not Receipt in Razor's Edge. So ReceipterPro puts a red dot, but ReceipterPro will still let you see the preview of the document. It's just not going to process it. The reason I wanted to point out this gift is because this gift was made by a corporation, but if we look at the receipt itself, we can see that the salutation is to an individual. This is because we have ReceipterPro set up for organization relationships. So ReceipterPro has identified a relationship on this record that corresponds to the type that we're telling it to check for, and it located one. And that's how ReceipterPro knows to use an individual as the salutation. Now, if a relationship had not existed, ReceipterPro would simply just address or set the salutation to the name of the organization. And this works the same for addressees as well. If you want the individual's name to pop up in the addressee block, you can do that also. So for example, here in the address block, we're setting the first line to be the name of the company and the second line to be attention, the contact type that it identified. So this is very easy to do in ReceipterPro. And you can also specify the actual contact type that you want ReceipterPro to use. So you can get very specific about the individual that ReceipterPro chooses when it's creating the addressee and salutations for your org records. As we mentioned before, ReceipterPro has a built-in template editor, and we will definitely talk a little bit more about the template editor in the advanced training session, but I do want to cover it briefly. If you wanted to access your templates in ReceipterPro, you could simply click this templates button right here in the ribbon bar. If you click that button, it's just going to open up a new screen and it's going to show you a list of your templates. And you can click on each of these templates, and if you wanted to make a change to one of these templates, you could easily do so. So let's say, for example, maybe I wanted to make a change to the full page template. I would simply just select it and click the little edit button right here, and that's going to open up the template in the editor. And again, we'll take a much more time to talk about this in the advanced session, but I just wanted to show you how to get to the template editor so that you could make some changes if you needed to. Okay. While we're on this screen, let's talk a little bit about business rules. I'm just going to click the business rules section on the left, and we can see here that we've got a list of business rules. So business rules tell ReceipterPro when it can print, when it can email, which template to use, which gifts are not receivable or should not be acknowledged. You can create a lot of customization with your business rules. If you wanted to edit a business rule, you could simply select the business rule. So I'm going to select this full page receipt. This is the business rule that we were looking at earlier that shows that full receipt template. So let's have a look at the rule. I just select it from the list, and then I'm going to click this little edit button here at the bottom. If you wanted to create a new business rule, you could click the green button right here. The business rule wizard will open up, and this wizard just guides you through the necessary steps for creating your business rule. And in this case, we can see that this business rule is called full page receipt. And from the description, we can see that if the fund name is Maple View, then we're going to use the full page receipt template. I'm going to click next here. You can see from the action type, this is how we tell ReceipterPro what should it do if this business rule applies. In this case, we're saying just set the template to full page receipt. On this screen is where we define our criteria. So we can see here that there are 2 criteria for this gift, and that ReceipterPro will apply this business rule if at least one of these criteria are met. The first criteria is the fund description. So we're saying if the fund description is Maple View, or the gift amount is over $1,000. So if either of those conditions are true, ReceipterPro is going to use the full page receipt template. And again, we'll take a much deeper look into the business rules in the advanced course. So let's say, for example, you've gone through each of these documents, you've looked at them, you've made any edits that you need to make, and you are finally ready to just process, you're ready to print and email these documents to the donor. Once you've gone through them all, you can click this process and send button, and that will process the documents, print them, and email them. In some cases, you may notice that for certain donors, if you import 3 or 4 gifts from them, you might only get one entry in this gift table. And you can see here that we have an example of this. So if I click on this last gift here, you'll see that in the gift ID column, instead of just having the ID for the gift, it says multiple. That means that there are multiple gifts for this particular document. If I click the plus button, we can actually see what they are. So there are 3 separate gifts that this donor made that we brought into ReceipterPro. In this case, what's happened is ReceipterPro, instead of generating 3 separate receipts for that particular donor, it's consolidated all 3 of those receipts into a single document. If we look over to the right, we can see that we have our single receipt here, but that it mentions all 3 gifts, and that it also totals the amount of all of the gifts. If there were benefits on these records, ReceipterPro would automatically have deducted the benefit amount from the amount column. We call this feature consolidated receipts. If you would rather have ReceipterPro generate 3 separate documents, one for each gift, you can certainly do that with ReceipterPro also, just by turning off the consolidated receipting option. Okay. If we were to click the process button and send these, again, ReceipterPro would send or print 1 document for this donor, not 3. Okay, so let's click the process button, and I will show you how the process works and what it looks like when you're actually processing gifts. So again, we're going to pretend that we've gone through these and we've made any changes. When we click the process button, ReceipterPro tells us the total number of documents that it is about to process. Now remember, this might not be all of the gifts that you imported. Certain gifts with a red dot, of course, will be ignored. Yellow dots will be ignored unless you used the reissue button as well. So when you get this message, just look at this number and just do a quick check and just do a quick mental check to say, yes, is that number correct? Is that the number of documents that I'm expecting? Once you are sure, you can click yes, and ReceipterPro will begin printing and emailing the documents. So this is going to go pretty quick. It's reserving receipt numbers. Now it's creating the PDFs. Now it's printing the 3 documents that were being printed. It's marking those as receipted now in Razor's Edge. And then finally, it's sending out the e-receipts. So remember that when it sends out e-receipts, it's also sending out any attachments that are with those e-receipts as well. Once it finishes sending out the e-receipts, it's going to mark those gifts as receipted or acknowledged, which it's doing now. And then it's finishing, and then now we're complete. So these gifts have all been processed. If we come back to ReceipterPro now, we'll see that these gifts have yellow dots next to them. And again, now a yellow dot just means that the gift has been receipted or acknowledged, which it has. So the emails have been sent, the documents have been printed, and the records in Razor's Edge have automatically been updated as well to be receipted or acknowledged, with today's date as the date on the record. In addition to marking the gift receipted or acknowledged, ReceipterPro will also create an attribute on each gift that will indicate the delivery method for the document. Well, that concludes the beginner's training to using ReceipterPro. We also have an advanced training video as well that goes deeper into the settings. It talks a little bit about creating PDF archived backups of all documents generated. Talks a little bit more about your email configuration and a lot of your email settings and how you can customize that. So I would encourage all of you to watch the advanced training session as well. Of course, if you run into any problems while running ReceipterPro, just simply send us an email at support@donortech.com, and one of our support staff will be happy to help.